Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video, something very important to look at. We are going to be taking a look at Arctic's new MX5 redesigned thermal compound. Is it any good? Is it worth the money? And actually, does it do any better than some of the cheaper pastes on the market? And also, the main question, is it actually better than MX4, the original? There's only one way to find out. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at Arctic's new MX5 thermal compound, which has a new redesigned compound which is seemingly better than MX4, which actually is one of the probably most popular pastes on the market right now. It's also blue. They've coloured it blue. I don't know if that makes any difference whatsoever. It's a new thermal compound, so supposedly easier to apply, a little bit better performance, all that kind of usual stuff. So what I thought I'd do is actually test this against some of the other popular ones on the market. So obviously we've got MX5, which we'll be testing. We've got MX4, which is obviously its predecessor. And also we've got some of those cheapo pastes which you can pick up on Amazon and AliExpress for kind of pence, and you get absolutely tons of the stuff. So the first one is just your generic thermal compound, basically called thermal grease. The SKU for this one is the HCIB. So yeah, this stuff I always keep some of this handy. It's quite useful for certain applications, or if you're doing many applications, maybe you're test fitting something, rather than wasting your money on your hard-earned MX compound, you can just use some of this cheap and cheerful stuff. It gets the job done. It's not particularly great, but it gets the job done. So we tested that one. The upgrade from that is a more kind of silver-based one. So this obviously is a little bit more messy. It's got very, very fine silver particles in it. This is the HY710, again, very popular on the market. A lot of people buy this one. The HY810 as well is also very popular, and there's tons of other ones on the market, which no doubt you're screaming from the rooftops saying, Mike, why not testing this? But this is what I've got to hand, so this is what I'm going to work with. I am going to be testing this all on a relatively modest system. Partially the reason because I'm a skinflint and I don't like expending an absolute ridiculous amount of money on parts, which I probably won't get the benefit of. But also I think it benefits you guys out there who possibly have got a more mid-range rig and are not really looking at the high end, but you're thinking, I've got this set up, how can I get a little bit more performance? How can I get my temps down a little bit better? And maybe if you're using something like the stock AMD cooler and you're perhaps thinking about using that, or maybe upgrading, we are going to be using Antec's A30 cooler, which is a relatively modest cooler again, so we're keeping up with the theme. All of this is just modest stuff. It's real world, it's the kind of stuff that you're likely to buy, you're likely to have, and this is going to be a good test to see if it actually makes any difference whatsoever under these conditions. So without further ado, let's get on with it. So to start off with, this is our donor system. If you haven't seen how this was built, we do have a video we did on a live stream, so you can check out up here. Again, a very modest system. This was our kind of entry-level gaming PC. We're using this, a Ryzen 5 2600X with a TDP of 95 watts. This is what I would consider a kind of like a grassroots system. There's nothing overly fancy in it, it just gets the job done. And again, this is what I think is a really good comparison to see if on these kind of modest parts, if there is any advantage on spending a little bit more money on your thermal compound. Another reason why I've chosen this particular one is because all the fans are actually static speed, so there's no interference with different fan speeds, etc. We are still going to be using these as airflow, so that is going to be taken into consideration. Ambient temperature in the room is somewhere around the 22-23 degree mark, so we'll be taking that into consideration, and the temperatures that we're going to be listing I'll be taking from hardware info or hardware monitor, and we'll see what they're like. We'll put them under some stress tests which are completely synthetic. We'll also take some kind of idling speeds as well from a general system with Windows installed, with Epic installed, and with Steam installed, all those kinds of things running in the background as you'd expect in a normal system. So this is going to be as real world as it gets, ladies and gentlemen. So only thing left to do is to basically get on with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through all four pastes using the stock cooler. As I said before, just a standard setup. We're going to do it under a high load situation and an idle situation to give you the temperatures for that. Then we're going to take out the stock cooler, replace it with the Antec A30, give it another test with all four pastes, and then we get and see what the difference is going to be like with your stock cooler, and also if you plan on maybe upgrading your cooler somewhere along the line, whether or not the performance is actually going to be tangible, and whether or not it actually relates to a better cooler is going to give you even better performance again. So yeah, lots of things to do. Let's get on with it. Okay, so as a quick primer to this particular video, part of how good a thermal compound is actually in the application. How easy it is to apply means it's going to get better coverage, etc, etc, etc. So consistency is one of the things which I do rate very highly, and also usability, and also the squish factor. So in order to demonstrate that, I've got two pieces of glass here, which is obviously not the most scientific way of doing it, because glass really isn't the same kind of consistency or actual material as the metal on a base plate of a CPU cooler. But from this, we'll give you a really good visual idea of consistency and how well they squish out. So we've got the four pastes here, so I'm going to go with the first one. So this is our cheapo paste. I'm just going to do a little line, a little dot actually on the glass here. So in terms of consistency, this one is relatively thick, almost like a clay, a waterized clay. So the next one, we've got the HY710. This one's actually quite difficult to get out because the nozzle, this screwed on the end, is actually quite tight. So let's give this one a go. This one, I think, if I remember rightly, is slightly smoother. Yeah, and it's got a slightly better viscosity, a little bit easier to manage, but it's extremely mucky because of all those little silver particles in it. Next one is going to be the MX4. This actually got the same type of end on it, which I find a particularly difficult thing to actually take off at times. So do a little line of that as well. That one, consistency wise, it seems kind of more runny, but is kind of somewhere in between the two of those. And actually I'd probably put that one a little bit too close to the other, but you'll certainly see how they squish out anyway. And the last one is going to be the MX5. I haven't actually seen what this is like, so I'm going to do this a little bit separately on the side there. Wow, that come out a little bit more than intended, but certainly is quite runny. Quite a nice viscosity to it. So what I'm going to do now, I've got the two plates of glass, and literally all I'm going to do is put one plate over the top of the other one and see how well they squish. So without putting any pressure on, kind of almost straight away, I can see the MX5 is actually pressed out quite well altogether. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do firm pressure across the entire thing and see how they come out like. So this would kind of emulate your CPU cooler under pressure. And we've kind of, yeah, we've got almost what I would have expected to see. So they spread out quite nicely in a circular fashion from the dots. Those were too close together, so that was probably a bad idea. But yeah, you can get an idea of how easy it spreads. And if I just move this along, and yes, there is. There's kind of stretch with it. And bizarrely, the MX4, even though I've stretched it across, it seems to have just affected those areas there. It hasn't kind of left kind of like a snail trail. Anyway, so that's consistency. The actual spread of them, I would say there's not really a great deal in it. The MX5 possibly spread a little bit easier, but very difficult to tell. But anyway, you get an idea of the consistencies there and how easy they are to apply. But let's do it on the CPU cooler because that's where it's going to make the most difference. Okay, so we're back and I've done a severe amount of testing. My head is spinning, the fans have been spinning, and the results aren't exactly what I was expecting. I'll be completely honest with you. So if you don't want to watch the rest of the video and you just want to know, is MX5 worth it? Probably not, is the easy answer. If you've already got MX4, there's no reason to get MX5 whatsoever. If you've run out, then yes, potentially it's worthwhile getting if the price is right. If it's considerably more expensive than the MX4 counterparts, then I would probably avoid it if I'm completely honest with you. But I need to explain my results. So let's go and have a look at the slides and I'll talk you through them. So first of all, we've got the stock cooler with the Ryzen 5 2600X. Precision boost overclocking is turned on and the fans are at full speed. The charts are in degrees C, as you can see, and also the ambient temperature in the room was 23 degrees. So looking first of all, on the left-hand side, we've got the HC1B paste, and pretty much the same results all the way through, to be honest with you, with most of the paste we did actually meet the thermal limitations of the cooler with this setup. So we've got 37 degrees on the HC1B, we've got 36 degrees as the minimum on the HY710, We've got 34 degrees, so a little bit of a drop there with the Arctic MX4, and a little drop further, again the margin of error, with the Arctic MX5 at 33 degrees. So those are the lowest recorded temperatures that we found. The highest temperatures were the same across the entire board, as you can see from the chart. We hit 95 degrees, which is the thermal max, and then we began throttling hard. So that is what it was like with the stock cooler. So let's take a look and see what it's like with a slight upgrade to a 92mm tower cooler with twin heat pipes, which is the Antic A30. Antic A30, Ryzen 5 2600X, precision boost overclocking on, full speed fans again. Lowest recorded temperatures again, very similar, 33 degrees on the HC1B, 34 degrees on the HY710, which is odd, it should be a little bit better, but it isn't. And Arctic MX4 and Arctic MX5 both recorded the same temperatures, 33 degrees C. Again, that is over ambient, so 10 degrees over ambient. The maximum temperatures, again, we have managed to get to the point where we've actually thermally throttled and also reached the thermal limitations of this particular cooler. So the one thing we have learned from this, regardless of which paste we use, pretty much if you're using a either stock cooler or a kind of a relatively low-end cooler on a Ryzen 5 2600X or any CPU which has got a TDP of 95 watts, then yeah, it's not going to be great. Regardless of what paste you use, you're going to get pretty much the same results. So after doing this, I figured it'd be a good idea to try something a little bit more beefier. Hence why I've now got the Snowman twin fan on here. So this is essentially kind of like two of these bolted together. We've also got 6 heat pipes, so hopefully we shouldn't be thermal throttling. So let's take a look at the results we got with this cooler. So again, Snowman 92mm twin fan setup with the Ryzen 5 2600X, PBO on, full speed fans, etc. Ambient temperature still 23 degrees, and with the HC1B, we got a low temperature of 30, the HY710, 31 degrees, the Arctic MX4, 30 degrees, and the Arctic MX5, again, 30 degrees. So these results pretty much show exactly what we're expecting. There is limitations to what the processor can actually go down to. It's unlikely we can get it any lower than that. Potentially if you left it long enough and let it go into hibernate mode, that kind of thing, then you may get slightly lower temperatures. But I think as a baseline, 30 degrees, yeah, it's pretty good. But the high temperatures are where it starts to get a little bit more interesting. So highest recorded temperature with the HC1B, 78 degrees C. The HY710, again, slightly oddly, 79 degrees, so slightly higher. The Arctic MX4, we did see a significant drop of about 5 or 6 degrees down to 73 degrees C. But strangely, the one thing which I actually was not expecting at all was the MX4 actually recorded slightly higher. Now, at first I was kind of, there's something definitely wrong here. So I checked my mountings, checked the thermal paste application, did it over again, and reran the tests. And I got pretty much exactly the same thing within those margins of error. So we actually recorded 2 degrees higher on this particular paste. So in this instance, with this cooler and with this setup, MX4 actually came out on top, which is really bizarre. I don't know how to explain it. In theory, it should be better. I thought it's down to user error, as it generally tends to be here. So again, went through the tests again, and I managed to repeat the results over and over. So it's very strange. So let's take a look at our Cinebench test results and see what the scores were and see if we can see any reason why this is actually happening. So looking at our Cinebench scores, we've got the Cinebench R23 scores. This again with the Ryzen 5 2600X, PBO on, fans at full speed. So using the HC1B, you can see there's a mixture of scores there. But actually the Snowman cooler did a lot better. So we can see that the cooler itself has done better. The paste doesn't really seem to make a huge amount of difference, although it does as we go further on. So changing between the HC1B to the HY710, we get a few points in difference. And as you can see, the first two on the left-hand side are extremely similar. When we go across to the Arctic MX4 and MX5 on the right-hand side, you can see the results are actually quite good. So bizarrely again, the Arctic MX5 on the far right actually scored less in Cinebench than it did with the MX4, which again, I still cannot work out. My only real thing is the fact that it does appear that the Arctic MX4 in this scenario actually worked out better. Now there's also some other reasons why you should possibly consider using MX4 over MX5. The actual application, MX5, is a little bit more sticky, a little bit more gloopy, and requires a little bit more work, and also is an absolute sod to remove from any surfaces. it's very, very sticky, gloopy stuff. Now in certain instances, this may work out to your benefit, such as things like graphics cards. If you're repasting them, you're going to leave them forever and a day, it's not going to be a massive issue. But if you are someone like me, where you're swapping coolers out all the time and swapping over systems and changing and swapping, it just becomes a real pain. And MX4, certainly in this regard, is much easier to use. Now, in terms of usability across the whole lot, the easiest one to use is actually, bizarrely, the one that worked out worst, which is the HY710. Although this does have those kind of silvery particles in, which do make a bit of a mess, it is actually very easy to apply. It spreads exceptionally well. The performance isn't great, it is basically a grease. So yeah, it does smooth very, very easily. The next easiest one is going to be definitely the just the cheapo goo. That goes on very easily, wipes off very easily. Doesn't perform particularly well, but will basically do the job. But when it comes down to these last two, MX4 and MX5, bizarrely, I don't know how they've managed to do it, but certainly MX4 appears to be easier to apply, certainly is easier to spread. Actually, under compression, seems to do a better job of actually spreading out on the CPU die. So I'm not entirely sure why MX5 actually exists. Yes, it's new, and they haven't made a great deal of song and dance about it. It hasn't been overly hyped anywhere, and to be honest with you, I've seen very few reviews on it. It's all been very, very kind of downbeat. So I'm really confused. Why does it exist? Does it need to exist? And should you buy it over MX4? Well, no, you shouldn't really, unless the price is really, really good, and for some reason you've got a little bit of a thing for blue thermal paste, which, yeah, you're never going to see anyway, so it makes no odds. So I'm really confused why it exists. I'm slightly disappointed. I was expecting much better, at least 1 or 2 degrees difference between the MX4 and MX5, which kind of you'd expect to see as a incremental improvement of a particular technology. Yes, I'm very confused. And please, if you've used MX5 yourself on your own setups, please do let me know what your results are. I am really genuinely interested to know, because I'm quite disappointed. Completely wasn't expecting that. I was expecting a definite kind of uptick in performance, but certainly with the setup that we've used, which granted is possibly not the most scientific and also probably not the most relevant these days. Obviously Ryzen 5 2600X is rather old school now, and these coolers are certainly not what you consider mainstream, but the stock cooler definitely is, which was probably not a good idea for this particular test. Anyway, let me know in the comment section, would you like me to repeat some of these tests with maybe a higher end processor, maybe a Ryzen 5 3600 or even above that, and with something else like a water cooler or a traditional 120mm tower cooler, such as the Freezer 34, those kinds of things. Let me know, I'll be interested to have your feedback. And as always, obviously what we do here on the channel is stuff that interests me and hopefully is going to interest you as well. So we do take your feedback and try and work on that. So there, that has been my my findings with Arctic's MX5. Yeah, to wrap it up, pretty disappointing, but yeah, interested to hear what you want to say. So I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.